Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be painting two Dreadnoughts, continuing our commission of Black Templars. Now, I've cleaned them off their junk, and I've also applied the paste to their bases, the Liquitex modeling putty. That's all dried overnight, and so I'm just going to get straight into painting. And vehicles are... I thought at first this was going to be a big project, but this actually went very quickly. Now with Iron Hand Steel, Nuln Oil, and Abaddon Black, I'm going to paint, well, all the metal in the armor. So with Iron Hand Steel, we're going to paint pretty much everything. If we can avoid it, we're not going to paint the cloth directly, that's just a waste of paint. And then once that's done, we're going to take sort of a 1-to-1-ish mix of Nuln Oil and Abaddon Black, adding a little bit of water to help it flow better and to make it a bit translucent. And we basically apply this everywhere. Then we're going to go back to Iron Hand Steel, and we are going to dry brush all the parts that are just going to be pure metallic. So like the gears and pistons and stuff in the back, the gun barrels, various pieces, grates, these exhaust ports and stuff like that. And then we're going to take Iron Hand Steel again with a proper fine brush, and we're going to paint the pistons, flat plates of metal. We're going to basically paint all the chains, details, and small things of metal. And boom, 90% of the model is done. Now with Steel Legion Drab, Baneblade Brown, Rakarth Flesh, and Agrax Earthshade, we're going to paint the flags and the loincloths that the Dreadnoughts have. Now I'm going to start off with a base layer of Steel Legion Drab and make sure it's well coated. I believe I do a second coat. Now when we continue on, I'm going to have the rest of the colors watered down pretty well so that they're pretty translucent. And so with Baneblade Brown I cover basically 90% of the banners except for the deepest recesses. And then with Rakarth Flesh I follow up covering around half of it, including the highlights and raised areas. But because these paints are so thin, it has this sort of like, some parts are more translucent than others, and I think it makes the cloth feel more realistic and real. It's not just these smooth, flat shades like dirty, worn rags, sort of, if you get what I'm saying. And then with Agrax Earthshade, I apply directly into the recesses folds of the flags, and in the open areas I take a bit of water and apply it after the fact to make it more watery and smooth, and the wash just flows into all the recesses and like sort of floats around the actual flag to spread around a bit. It makes it look interesting. Alright, with Hobgrot Hide, Xandri Dust, Agrax Earthshade, and I don't show it here but Lamian Medium, we're going to paint the Purity Seals. We're going to start with a base layer of Hobgrot Hide. Then we're going to take a 1-to-1 of Hobgrot and Xandri, and we're going to paint the edges of all the Purity Seals, the folds, and the raised areas, covering like 30 to 50% of them. And then we're going to go with Pure Xandri Dust and paint the edges, the most edges, the raised areas, the most raised areas of the open centers, and the folds. Just thin lines. Then we're going to do a 1-to-1 mix of Agrax Earthshade, and we're going to apply around 2 coats of this throughout it. Because it's dilute and stuff, the color will be subtle, but after a layer or two, you'll notice that there is more depth without ruining any of the brightness and highlights. And now with Corn Red, Mephiston Red, and Evil Sun Scarlet, we're painting the wax and the gun barrel of the Stormbolter. We start with the base layer of Corn Red all over, including the casing of the Stormbolter. Then we're going to cover the entire casing of the Stormbolter in Mephiston Red, and we're going to paint 90% of the seals with Mephiston Red. Only the deepest, darkest recesses will have the Corn Red showing. Then with Evil Sun Scarlet, we will paint along the edges, just straight lines along the gun barrel, or the gun casing of the Stormbolter, and as for the Purity Seals, only the outer ring and like a dot in the center, depending on the Purity Seals, of course. Alright, with Brass Scorpion, Retributor Armor, Liberator Gold, and Ironbreaker, we're going to paint all the gold. So we're going to start with the base layer of Brass Scorpion everywhere. There is a lot of gold all over this thing. A lot on the edges and stuff. I just have fun with it. This gold step was the longest in painting the entire thing. And then with Retributor Armor, so what we're going to do is we're going to cover basically 90% of all the gold we just did. Only the deepest, darkest recesses of like some wings of Aquila around here and there, you'll see the Brass Scorpion. And now with Liberator Gold, we're going to start with this as our first highlight. We're going to paint the edges of all the folds, bends, and square things, as well as the edges of the wings as best we can, and stuff like that. And then finally, Ironbreaker will be a fine highlight on the most raised areas, the edges, the top parts, the top edges of every gold piece. And have some Ironbreaker, maybe a little bit in some of the skulls and stuff, the most raised areas. Just have fun with it. And now with Caliban Green and Wah Flesh, we're going to paint these Searchlights. We're going to start with Caliban Green in the center of each of these lights, and then we're going to try to fill them in, like cover 90-95% of each of these squares with Wah Flesh. And if you spill over onto the metal, just take some Iron Hand Steel and just clean it up. And now with Skeleton Horde Contrast, Guilliman Flesh, and Thondia Brown, we're going to weather some of the things. So basically, with Skeleton Horde Contrast, we're going to apply this to the gun barrels, don't forget the Stormbolter, and the exhaust ports. This will yellow the metal. And then towards the closest to the barrel or the exhaust port, we're going to place Guilliman Flesh to redden it. And then finally, with a round dot of Thondia Brown, as best we can paint round circles, we'll make the gun barrel, or gun hole. Now I'm going to apply a Black Templar decal because of the vehicles, but then I take a look at the vehicle decal sheet and I notice that all the Black Templar decals are white. It's like, what the crap? So I go with the basic Black Templar one. It's just small, so I place it in the center of the banner. And then with AKA Interactive Ultra Matte Varnish, and with the Army Painter War Paints Anti-Shine Matte Varnish, we're going to varnish the model. So with AKA Interactive, we're going to apply this to all cloth and purity seals everywhere. And then once that's done, we're going to paint the Anti-Shine Matte Varnish. It's something you can apply to metal and still retains its shine. So we're going to apply this to their shoulders and the front and back part, basically where people are going to grab the model in order to preserve it. And done. Well, this was easy. Simple. Very, very simple. Okay, these two Dreadnoughts, I did them 90% of them in one sitting. The only things that were outside of that was the drying of the putty on the base and then the drying of the sand on the base, which I didn't show, but it follows the same pattern I've been doing for this entire commission. And so basically, yeah, I mean, this was actually very simple, quick, and done. And also the models were not damaged by that horrible spray, so they're actually really good. Now, the one thing I will point out is I really like how the banners turned out with that very translucent paint, just applying it on. And you can kind of see how, like, they're, like, ragged. Yeah. But apart from that, this was actually very simple and done. I did it in a handful of hours. Well, less than 2 handful of hours. Let's put it that way. Alright. Well, that was fast. Back to the orcs. Alright, so like the video if you like the video, share it if you want to share it, comment if you want to comment, like if you like it, dislike if you dislike it, and I will be back soon.